All right, this is kind of a weird one because one of the best elements of The Rise of Skywalker, one that I've talked to the most people about, has been how there is a subtle FU to The Last Jedi. How basically Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio and Bob Iger and everyone involved in the project looked at The Last Jedi, looked at the response to The Last Jedi, went, we don't want to do this one again, so why don't we find a way to move past it? And they also took some subtle jabs at the movie in the process. Now, that might have just been fan service to those fans who were very much not happy with the way things turned out in regards to that. I don't quite know. But it felt like some of the comments that JJ had made about laughing at the fact that Snoke died when he read the script for The Last Jedi, that makes me feel like there was a little bit of a personal kind of at Rian Johnson over this one. You know, he's come out and he's talked him up a bit. Oh, Ryan's a great guy. He's an insanely talented guy. He did an amazing job. No, not really. He broke the fandom in half. Quite frankly, I think that's the truth of it here. Here we are 2 years later, and it still comes up like every single day. There's a lot of hurt that happened there. But that being said, Chris Terrio here is saying that that The Rise of Skywalker doesn't undo The Last Jedi. No. It doesn't undo The Last Jedi. But it cuts it real deep. It does. Now, it says here, some critics have said that The Rise of Skywalker walks back several plot points from The Last Jedi to reset the final Star Wars as director J.J. Abrams wanted it. But screenwriter Chris Terrio says, I think they're missing the point. Are we missing the point? I mean, we just kind of wanted it to be better than The Last Jedi. What I feel is that The Rise of Skywalker took the better elements of The Last Jedi, and like especially the Reylo relationship, which I don't want to say the word Reylo, but it's the first thing that came to mind. I'm not a fan of that term, but I do appreciate the relationship building in The Last Jedi between the two characters, and I thought there's some really solid chemistry there that I did feel came through very well on this movie. Yes, I'm a person who actually really enjoyed the ending and how that whole thing played out, and call me a softie, I don't care. I didn't want there to be a redemption arc, but there was a redemption arc, and I'm happy with it. Anyway, it says here that who could have predicted that the new Star Wars movie would have been controversial? Following The Rise of Skywalker's debut earlier this month, certain segments of the discussion surrounding the film have focused on perceived breaks it made with the Skywalker Saga's previous installment, The Last Jedi. But screenwriter Chris Terrio, who wrote The Rise of Skywalker, insists that he and Abram were not trying to reverse director Rian Johnson's work. Critics who believe this to be the case, he said, are missing the point. It's not missing the point. There was a dead stop, narratively speaking, with The Last Jedi. I get what Johnson was attempting to do. And like I said, I think he took some bold choices that in other context would have been perceived as being better. His handling of legacy characters was bunk. It will always be bunk. It will never not be bunk. And no amount of just about it on the internet is going to change my damn mind. It's been 2 years. I haven't let that go. I'm sorry. But you still can't sit there and say what we saw on screen did not undo a fair amount of The Last Jedi. And there's a lot of it there. Speaking with the Wrap, Terrio said there's no rivalry between Abrams and Johnson. Instead, writing Rise of Skywalker involved taking the ideas that came from The Last Jedi and trying to complicate them and develop them and to have some new surprises. He says are in dialogue with each other. Well, they kind of have to be, because Disney didn't want to do episode 10 to make episode 9 a two-parter, or they didn't want to go back and absolutely 100% retcon episode 8 to make this movie episode 8, which is one of the things that many people suggested. And I think had they come out and said, you know what, we realized we made a mistake on that one, and we're going to kind of go back a little bit, we're going to hit that Control Alt Delete button and just kind of back out, I think they would have had themselves a better time. And so anyway, I thought it was pretty funny. Now it says The Rise of Skywalker does include several reveals that seem to pivot away from Johnson, from what Johnson sought to achieve with The Last Jedi. Rey's parentage is a starkest example, which is, your parents were nobody. They were junkers that died in a pauper's grave. Oh, Palpatine's your grandfather. Ooh, yeah. Whoopsie. In the previous film, Daisy Ridley's protagonist was said to have unremarkable origins, but in The Rise of Skywalker, Abrams made her a Palpatine. That move, Terrio said, didn't detract at all from the democratization of the Force. After all, the film also indicates that John Boyega's Finn and others without famous relatives are also Force sensitive, which was a plot point that's interesting but went really nowhere. Finn should have not actually... Finn kind of got the worst of it in this movie. He really did. There was like no character development with Finn. Like, Finn should have been like the spark that rose up the First Order to fight back against the Sith Troopers, right? If Jannah and the other escapees were also stormtroopers who didn't want to be stormtroopers, and they were like, hey, we've heard of you. You inspired us to leave, sort of thing. Then we could have seen this situation play out a lot differently, where he was the spark of the resistance, and it would have given Finn a far greater role in this movie, rather than, oh, Ray, I gotta tell you something. Oh, Ray dead. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's no follow through. There's no real conclusion to that point, other than he's force sensitive, but it doesn't give us anything. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't hook up with Jonna and then force pull her hair. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't happen. So nothing really goes on there that I think is really kind of, I don't think it really deepens the story, even though Rey being Palpatine's granddaughter, I think does. Now, it says here that the idea of royalty in the dark side was put in a basket and floated down the river, then to grow up in the most improbable of circumstances, and then finally be offered the throne felt extremely strong to us. We thought that that was a more dramatically interesting predicament. Not only that everything is resolved and that Rey is at peace with her past, but that she's even worse information than in The Last Jedi. So I think it's the development of dramatic ideas and not rejection. And I think that when critics try to act as though our film is some sort of spat between two directors, they're not understanding how writers think. As a writer myself, not a great one, but I've written before. No, you were kind of backed into a corner. You were narratively backed into a corner. There's no way that you could take what was left at the end of The Last Jedi and necessarily springboard it into maybe, let's say, what we saw between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. There was nothing at stake. There was just nothing at stake. You know, Kylo ran the First Order. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. Like, nothing about that was even like, okay, that we kind of saw that coming anyway. Luke is dead. That was a big one, but again, no explanation, and no one really talked about it outside of the shot of the broom boy, who was meant to be your big, like, crescendo piece, your big poignant point at ending the film on. Oh, this boy has the Force abilities, and he's looking out into the heavens, and broom boy is going to grow up to be the next Jedi. And like, hey, I'm cool with that. I have no problem with that. More people are going to be Force sensitive as the Force works in mysterious ways. It's not all related to bloodline. However, in the Skywalker Saga, it's absolutely related to bloodlines. And I really think that The Last Jedi absolutely pushed away from that in a way that was just fundamentally dumb, and it hurt it immensely. Anyway, going on to say here, part of the reason the Rise of Skywalker's tweaks on The Last Jedi's story have faced such scrutiny might be the comments Abram made during a New York Times interview, saying that he praised The Last Jedi for being full of surprises and subversion and all sorts of bold choices, but added that it's a bit of a meta approach to a story. I don't think people go to Star Wars to be told this doesn't matter. When you're going to, like, let's say Rogue One, it may not matter, right? At the end of the day, none of the characters who died, their lives mattered in the end. They got, except for getting that plans of the Death Star to the resistance, or to the rebellion, in order to fight back against the Empire. Their lives mattered in that regard, but other than that, they were forgotten to the relics of history. No one's going to write about them, right? But in regards to the Skywalker Saga, there's going to be legends that are going to form around that. It's kind of a different take on it. And by approaching the meta aspect of this doesn't matter, like none of this mattered, that did more to damage the franchise than what JJ did. People like to argue that this movie, Rise of Skywalker, completely invalidates Anakin's arc. It doesn't at all, period. It just kind of continues the story. Like, life doesn't end at happily ever after. Things keep going, things get worse. I like to kind of point my attention on that one to, let's say, the National Treasure movies, right? At the first movie, Nick Cage and Diane Kruger hook up. At the beginning of the second movie, they are broken up because she can't stand him because he's an ass. That's life. People get together and they realize maybe this doesn't quite work too well, and then they go on their own way. Or Leia and Han together at the end of Return of the Jedi, but 30 years later, they broke and their kids now ruling the galaxy, right? I mean, like, life goes on and it doesn't always get better. Anyway, Abrams also made sure to say that the franchise needed a film like Johnson's to stay in balance. No, it didn't. It didn't need a pendulum swing one direction in order to swing the other way. It could have had that, but not in such a way where the pendulum broke off and then decapitated somebody when it struck into the wall. Anyway, Abrams too has rejected the notion that his film seeks to undo the work of its predecessor. At a post-screening Q&A earlier this month, he noted that Johnson even consulted on the production story, saying, "We had conversations with Rian at the beginning. It's been nothing but collaborative. In making the film," he said, "we knew starting this that any decision we made, design decision, musical decision, a narrative decision, would please somebody and infuriate somebody else, and they're all right." And that's the whole point. That kind of came up too. They're all right on the critics. I did talk about that And it makes an interesting point about how people are going to come at this from different perspectives. You have your TLJ fans and your TLJ haters, and they're going to look at Rise of Skywalker pro or negative. And considering that Rise of Skywalker is being, I think, received by the fans a lot better than The Last Jedi, J.J. Abrams kind of succeeded on that one a little bit more. I understand what Chris Terrio is saying here. They don't want to try to invalidate The Last Jedi, but the problem with it is, though, is they did. I mean, you can watch The Last Jedi one time, get the key plot points that you want, and then skip over that and watch right to The Rise of Skywalker. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the person that watches like Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. It is the dreariest of the films, but they just watch the battle sequences and anything with the Ents, and then they just get over to Return of the King. Because as a middle story goes, it kind of lulls. And The Last Jedi really lulls. It drags it down, and it ended up sticking in that down space for for just over 2 years. Here we are in a position where they took their shots. People responded, and I think they maybe feel guilty about it. I don't think they maybe wanted to be perceived as being negative. Maybe they didn't want to actually come across as being on the attack. And that being said, they still did it, and we're all still kind of applauding them for it, considering the fact that it's just not a good movie, objectively not a good film. And it's one that we all wanted to be a good movie, and even 2 years later, it hasn't gotten any better. You know, sometimes bad movies can do better the more you watch them. This is not one that people are going back and rewatching, I don't think, as much. In fact, I think it does more to damage the franchise than it does to help it, which is why Disney dropping it on Disney Plus the day after Christmas during the hype of Rise of Skywalker, making its money, I think maybe potentially might have hurt it. People go, oh God, this was so bad, I don't want to go see the other one. But then at least they have Mandalorian to fall back on. Anyway, I'll leave it to you, your thoughts, your opinions. Do you think that that this is trying to invalidate the criticisms they made at The Last Jedi in The Rise of Skywalker? Or do you think that this was just like, it really just comes across as coincidental and people are reading into it too much? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. If you made it this far, type Skywalker into the comment box so I know you made it. Hit that like, smack that bell, smack that subscribe, join the Discord, hit the Patreon, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace out. Hey, thank you very much for watching the video. If you want to keep the conversation going, and if you made it this far, you clearly do, come on in and join the Discord. Link is in the video description. Can't wait to see you there. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.